Okay, here's the next PowerPoint video lecture. The last thing we talked about were the false statements. So this is kind of our pickup point. Comp studied the idea of statics and dynamics. If something is static by definition, that means that it does not change. It stays the same. So social statics are the study of social systems as they exist at a given time. It's the study of stability and order. Within any given society, there have always been social institutions such as family. Whether we're looking at hunting and gathering societies many years ago, even up to current industrial and post-industrial societies of today, the family has always been an important social unit or institution. Government, warfare, so these are some things that generally tend to kind of always be around. Now, social dynamics, on the other hand, if something is dynamic, that means or implies that it changes or is variable. So social dynamics are the study of social processes, especially social change. So we're looking at the study of social change with dynamics. Institutions, in and of themselves, don't change. I mean, families, government, politics, those have always been around, probably always will be. But the intricacies and the power structures, for example, may change. Like, for example, we've always had, people in positions of power, like a president or CEOs, but the types of people do change. Political parties that are in power within these positions change. So there are obviously factors and forces that do change and evolve through society. So we study both of those. The next sociologist is Emile Durkheim. That's not pronounced Emily, by the way. This is a guy. And Emile Durkheim was a French mathematician as well as being a sociologist. He was the first academic sociologist. He was the first sociologist to use statistics to quantify social data. That's very important. Understanding that sociology has struggled, and still does, to be considered a science. He was the first to actually apply statistics to social things or phenomena. So that's important to understand. He's known for his work on suicide. He was also agnostic. He realized the importance of religion, but personally he was not really sure himself whether God was real or not. That's what agnostic means. He was not an atheist. He was not a non-believer. He just was not sure. He didn't know. His important ideas that we'll discuss: social integration. We'll talk about his theory of suicide, statistics as he is applying them to the social sciences, mechanical solidarity, as well as organic solidarity. Now, the first thing he talks about is social integration, and your book talks about these terms as well. Social integration is the degree to which members of a group or society feel united by shared values and other social bonds. Otherwise known as social cohesion. If something is cohesive, that means it sticks together or binds something together. His theory of suicide is based upon his idea of social integration. He was the first to understand and point out that people who are less socially integrated are more likely to commit suicide, and vice versa. Now, suicide is the willful taking of one's own life. We probably already know that. So how does integration tie into that? Well, he found that suicide rates were the highest in areas where people were less integrated, where they were less connected and less tuned into each other. And vice versa, in areas where populations were dense, where people were packed in together, they connected with each other, they were tuned into each other's needs, suicide rates were much lower. So strong social bonds help to prevent suicide. Here's how it works. Durkheim discovered that people, again, who have weaker social ties are more likely to commit suicide. This explains why Protestants, males, and the unmarried have the highest suicide rates. And you're thinking, well, gee, why might that be? Well, Protestantism encourages greater freedom of thought. With greater freedom of thought comes the idea of less connection to other things and other people, less integration, thus higher suicide rates. Males, not necessarily biologically, but are socially taught to be independent, to be separated from others, to be fierce, to be independent. And again, that ties in very nicely with lack of social integration, which predicts suicide. And the unmarried, people who are not married lack the ties and responsibilities that come with marriage. They're less checked in to other people. They're less connected. So if you're a white Protestant male who's not married, your chances of suicide go way up. according to Durkheim's theory. Durkheim also talks about mechanical versus organic solidarity. So we'll talk about the first type, a mechanical solidarity. This is a type of social integration or cohesion where people in society are bound together. They're linked by what they have in common. And you'll see that this is more characteristic in primitive societies, where you have a lower division of labor. Let's go back thousands of years. The very first types of societies were hunting and gathering societies. You basically had a society that was maybe 40 or 50 people in size. That's it. Not very big. Today's society within our country, millions of people within a society. So if we go back thousands of years ago, you basically had, let's say you had 40 people in a society, 20 men, 20 women. You've had a very low division of labor. Labor is work. Men were hunting, women were gathering berries and child care duties. That's pretty much it. So if you couldn't hunt and you were a man, you were a liability to your group. You depended upon each other's in terms of what you had in common with them to make things work. Now, organic solidarity, on the other hand, this is a type of social integration where people are bound together by their differences. Now, when you fast forward to the type of society that we live in a post-industrial, even an informational or information age society, where we are dependent upon each other for what we don't have in common. Now, let me explain that. Millions of people in a society that we live in today, millions. I always ask the question in class, how many of you, if you woke up tomorrow and you were the only person left on earth, how many of you could be self-sufficient? How many of you could survive and carry out your lives the way that you do right now? And half the students are like, yeah, I could do that. Well, then we start asking some more questions. Well, what if your car breaks down? Can you fix your car? Well, some people can. Okay. Can you grow your own food? Can you wash it? Can you cook it? When your plumbing goes, can you fix that? Can you do that kind of work? Your wiring goes bad eventually. Can you fix that? Can you maintain infrastructure, interstates? Your computer goes down. Can you fix that? The answer is no. We count on each other in a myriad of ways. We need doctors. We need lawyers. We need teachers. We need people working on roads, fixing our internet when it goes down, fixing our cell phones when we get mad and throw them across the room, and then we have to have repairs or replacements. Or something like that. So we count on each other in terms of how we're different in more modern and complex societies. So there you have it. With mechanical solidarity, backtracking, primitive societies based on resemblance. Again, we're linked by our similarities here. Little dependence between social units. Societies could exist pretty independently from one another. With organic solidarity, like you see in our society, modern society, again, we're linked by our differences. There's a lot of dependence or interdependence between social units. In other words, we count on people in other states, in other countries. I would ask this question. Do we count on people in the Middle East in terms of oil and gasoline? The answer is yes, whether you want to recognize that or not. That's the answer. Computer technology, if you've ever needed tech support, have you ever made a phone call and talked to someone overseas? I'll bet you have. Nothing wrong with that, but you're counting on and depending on someone else or a group of people from a different part of the world. So that's what we're looking at with organic solidarity. We are linked to people who are much different from us, who even speak different languages from us. And let's just go ahead and call that the end of this part. Thank you.